There are a new set of Macs out there, and Intel is on the outside this time. Apple's new lineup of Macs includes the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro, all powered by the new Apple M1 system on a chip. But before you commit to picking one up, here are the top 5 reasons to hold off. At number 5, this is a first-generation Apple product. Okay, one of the best things about Apple products is how well they work. Way back when, the first-generation Intel MacBook Pros had some problems with heating and cooling. This led to performance problems, amongst other things. Other MacBooks that used new materials saw oddities and chipping. The iPhone 4 is famous for its antenna gate thing. While it was not a first-generation product, this iPhone had a much different design than the previous generations. In more recent news, the AirPods Pro had some noise cancellation problems, and some said they heard crackling sounds. Look, I'm not saying that all first-generation Apple products are bad. Far from it. The company has a good track record and has exceptional standards when it comes to well-designed devices, except for its mice. Those are horrible. But these Macs are the first Mac machines to move to Apple's own silicon. This requires a whole new everything. Coming in at number 4, virtualization is going to be a pain. If you have any reliance on Windows or virtualizing other operating systems on your Intel-powered Mac, that's going to be a problem with the M1 powered Macs. If you don't care about that, skip this one and head to number 3, would you? Anyway, the M1 is based on the ARM architecture, so good luck trying to run Windows on it. One of the best but most underrated features of the Mac was the ability to run macOS without any hacking and have Windows running. You could either boot into either operating system or you could run virtual machines. Sometimes you just need a program that was not on Mac. Or maybe you wanted to game on the Windows side, because Mac gaming is... Wait, is Mac gaming a phrase? I don't know. Apple did say you'll be able to virtualize Linux though. Coming in number 3, if you have a current Intel-based Mac, there is no reason to jump ship yet. As much as Apple pushes people forward by taking away ports or changing processors, Apple does take care of its users. The company has supported all kinds of hardware with software updates for the iPad and the iPhone. Back when Apple switched from the PowerPC to Intel in 2006, PowerPC machines were supported with OS X updates until the introduction of Snow Leopard in 2009. So let's say you bought a PowerPC iBook or PowerBook in 2006, you still had updates for 3 years. I'm not saying you have to wait 3 years to upgrade. I'm just saying don't think Apple is just going to leave you in the dust. That's not going to happen for a while. At number 2, the hardware. This is not a complaint about build quality. This is more about how little Apple pushed the envelope when it came to these new Macs. The new MacBook Air with M1 looks like the old MacBook Air. The same is true of the Mac Mini and the MacBook Pro. Why should that matter? Well, as Apple touted, the M1 has some great performance. The MacBook Air even ditched its fans because the M1 is so wonderful. Did Apple use that opportunity to redefine the look of the MacBook Air or the Pro? No. Can someone send Apple a picture of a Dell XPS 13? Just airdrop it over. The new MacBook Air and Pro both still have 720p cameras. Why? Why not update that? On top of that, I had to double and triple check this. The M1 MacBook Pro loses 2 USB-C ports. The 2020 Intel MacBook Pro 13-inch had 4 Thunderbolt 3 USB-C ports. The M1, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports with USB 3.1 Gen 2. Why? Why did you do this, Apple? Let's stick with the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro. Its maximum storage is 2 terabytes. The Intel one was 4. The max amount of RAM on the M1 is halved compared to the 2020 Intel machine. This I'm not so worried about because performance on iPhones has been great even if they don't have the most RAM. Well, at least all the new M1 Macs have Wi-Fi 6. And the number 1 reason to hold off on getting an M1 Mac is simple: app support. It will take time for apps to be ready for the M1 Mac. The more programs you use on your Mac, the more issues you could be facing. I remember back in the PowerPC days that some apps just never made the jump to Intel. Yes, you could run the app in emulation using Apple's translation software, Rosetta. However, the performance was not super. Apple does have Rosetta 2. This will allow for existing Intel Mac apps to run on the new M1 Macs. Apple claimed that in some cases, this combination is faster when compared to certain older Intel Macs. Apple's optimized all of its apps, iMovie, GarageBand, Logic Pro, Final Cut Pro. If you use only Apple apps, you might be good to go on day one. Adobe will be making versions of its software for the M1, but keep in mind that Photoshop won't make the leap until next year. And even when that happens, that version will be a universal app that runs on both Intel and M1 Macs. That means the advantages to having the first M1 Mac may not be so great. Let's talk about iOS and iPad apps running on the new Macs. That's great. So if you have an iPad or iPhone, you don't really need this feature, but it's nice. Oh, a question though. How do touch apps translate to a keyboard and mouse or trackpad? None of the M1 Macs come with a touchscreen. I guess you could use the trackpad, but there's going to be some kind of disconnect when it comes to using an iPad and using a new M1 Mac. So you made it to the end. Here's why these Macs seem awesome. The battery life is probably going to be insane. Apple's talked about some great numbers. We'll see if they hold up. The Mac Mini costs less than before. Overall, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how often we get Mac refreshes. Apple's not stuck waiting for Intel anymore. Also, I expect we're getting MacBook Pros with some kind of cellular connectivity later. If you want a device that runs iOS and runs on cell networks, check this thing out. It's called the iPhone. Is that right? Sounds weird. I'm Aya Zakhtar, and I'll see you online.